Thank you, Devin. Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jesse Panuccio, the Acting Associate Attorney General, and I would like to welcome everyone to the Department of Justice for today's Police Week panel on the 287G program. The Attorney General has a deep appreciation for police departments and sheriff's offices at the state, local, and tribal level, which comprise about 85% of the nation's law enforcement officers. Effective partnerships between these frontline officers and our federal law enforcement agencies are critical to ensuring that we can effectively fight violent crime, stem the tide of the opioid crisis, and eliminate transnational criminal organizations, including when these problems are exacerbated by illegal immigration. To that end, the 287G program is a vital tool in the arsenal of both immigration and customs enforcement and state and local law enforcement entities that wish to strengthen public safety. The program prioritizes the removal of criminal aliens, that is, those illegal aliens who have committed or are suspected of committing crimes, by ensuring a safe and effective transfer from local detention to ICE. 287G not only keeps communities safe, but it also keeps federal officers safe by promoting the peaceful transfer of custody in a secure location rather than forcing at-large arrests where access to weapons is greater. I'd like to introduce Nathalie Asher from ICE, who can go into more detail about the 287G program. Then I will introduce our remaining special guests. Ms. Asher is the Deputy Executive Associate Director of ICE's Enforcement and Removal Operations. Ms. Asher joined the former Immigration and Naturalization Service, INS, in the Seattle field office in 1996 and rose through the ranks until she was promoted to Field Office Director for Enforcement and Removal Operations in Seattle. In this capacity, she was responsible for operations in 3 states, Washington, Alaska, and Oregon. Now, in her role as Deputy EAD, she is part of a leadership team that executes ERO's mission to identify, arrest, and remove aliens who pose a national security or public safety risk, or those who otherwise enter the United States illegally or undermine our lawful system of immigration. Thank you, Ms. Asher, for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Jesse. Well, good morning, and thank you all for being here today to discuss the 287G program. I'd first like to thank Sheriffs Louderback, Jenkins, and Hodgson for their partnership with and support of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and in particular with my division, Enforcement and Removal Operations. They clearly share ICE's commitment to strengthening public safety as evidenced by their participation in this powerful program. The 287G program is an invaluable force multiplier that allows the authority for ICE to delegate to state and local law enforcement officers certain authority to enforce federal immigration law under the supervision and direction of ICE. The goal of 287G is to enhance public safety by identifying aliens, lodging immigration detainers, and initiating removal proceedings by issuing charging documents on deportable criminal aliens and other priority individuals who've been booked into a detention facility. The 287G program utilizes the jail enforcement model to accomplish its mission. Under this model, ICE computer equipment and systems are installed within partnering state and local jails, and the designated immigration officers, known as DIOs, work under the direct oversight of ICE supervisory personnel. Selected state and local law enforcement officers must attend and successfully complete ICE's initial 4-week 287G basic training course prior to being delegated ICE immigration authority. The basic program includes coursework in immigration law, the use of ICE databases, multicultural communication, and the avoidance of racial profiling. Subsequently, these officers then must attend a 1-week refresher training every 2 years at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Charleston, South Carolina. Partnering agencies are inspected by the ICE Office of Professional Responsibility every 2 years to ensure compliance with ICE policies, procedures, and directives. They also receive continual oversight from program managers at ICE headquarters and from the respective local ICE ERO field office. Currently, ICE has 287G agreements with 78 law enforcement agencies in 20 states. ICE has trained and certified 1,822 state and local officers to enforce immigration law. In 2017, ICE added 39 memorandums of agreement, more than doubling the number of 287G partnerships over the previous year. In FY 2017, there were 25,884 287G encounters nationally, and 5,996 removals stemming from those encounters. Of those removals, approximately 4,500 resulted from those FY 2017 encounters. The benefits of the 287G partnership with the local and state agencies are significant. By working together, local and federal officers can better identify and remove criminal aliens, a tremendous benefit to public safety. One of the biggest benefits to our 287G partners is that they are able to timely and safely identify individuals amenable to removal proceedings while still in the secure setting of a detention facility. Our state and local law enforcement partners have become a force multiplier, allowing ICE to actively engage more officers and agents into ongoing enforcement operations nationwide that require increased manpower. The 287G program continues to receive overwhelmingly positive feedback from its partners, as evidenced by this morning's panel. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this overview, and I'm happy to answer questions you may have during the panel discussion.
Thank you, Nathalie. Appreciate that. I want to open it up now for our panel. Let me just ask, where's Devin? Are we doing introductions of the sheriffs or just go right into it? They'll let them introduce themselves. That's right. So, well, let me start with this, Ms. Asher. How do you identify sheriffs who are a good fit for the 287G program?
So, first and foremost, this is a voluntary program. ICE in no way is out forcing sheriffs or a heavy hand for individuals to participate in this initiative. It's in fact totally voluntary, and I'm sure you'll learn later with the sheriffs that most who have come on and continue to be with us want to continue this strong program. You know, the strength of this is clearly it's a partnership effort in that we have and share the same mission, and that is just the interest of public safety for those in the community, visitors in the community, and really for those of the immigrant community as well.
Thank you very much. And let me turn to Sheriff Louderback of Jackson County, Texas, to get the perspective from the opposite side, which is first, please introduce yourself and then tell us a bit about how you knew 287G was the right fit for your county, why you were drawn to the program.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sheriff.
I'm Sheriff A.J. Louderback, representing Jackson County, Texas. Geographically, we sit on the 59 corridor in Texas, which is one of the major corridors to Houston. And this program is best described by me as law enforcement agencies working together to increase public safety. That's all it is. It is a partnership. It is the ability for us to work together with all law enforcement agencies in this country for public safety and the protection of the United States. And as Texas sits there on the Mexican border, it's imperative that we take a role in there and do what we need to do as Texas sheriffs and sheriffs in this country to play the part that we're meant to be and that our citizens actually are demanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. Appreciate your being here today and also your work. Let me turn to Sheriff Jenkins of Frederick County, Maryland. Sheriff, can you tell us a little bit more about your background, but also any concerns about proper oversight of the program? And then also, do you believe that the results you see from the 287G program merit the resources, the personnel resources that you put into it?
Good morning. Sheriff Jenkins, Frederick County, Maryland, actually about 50 miles from here in Washington, D.C. I'm in my 12th year as sheriff, 28 years with the law enforcement agency at home. We've been in the 287G program for 10 years now. It's proven to be a very effective partnership, basically keeping criminals off the streets of our county and in essence reducing crime. Like Sheriff Louderback said, it is a very effective partnership, no different than working with the FBI, the DEA, Secret Service, as we all do every single day. Our program currently, we have 18 officers in our detention center that are trained. It's become a normal course of doing business in our jail, and again, it's keeping the criminals off the street. So I want to talk a little bit about the oversight and supervision of the program. It's absolutely important. It's expected, rightfully so, by both the citizens who are out there, who both are in favor, and the opponents, because listen, immigration enforcement is a federal duty, a federal obligation, but they do need local partners. So the public and other law enforcement agencies would expect that there's the proper oversight, the proper supervision, and I can say nothing but good about the partnership that we've had, the appropriate oversight. It's been a flawless program. My officers in the jail have been trained. They're very good at what they do, but again, that piece of supervision needs to be there, and it is there. The results of the program, what merits the program, very simply this. We lock people up for committing a crime. We determine when they're in our jail, and this is all confined to the jail. There's no immigration checks on the street, nothing whatsoever. Once an individual is arrested, everybody is asked the same series of questions. 2 questions stand out in our jail. Where were you born, and what country are you a citizen of? And if we get any other answer than the United States of America, we can do our status investigation. Once we've done that, if it's appropriate, my deputies are trained to file the detainer, do the appropriate paperwork through their training and authorization, and then again, all that receives the proper oversight. So here's on the other side. People will argue the cost of the program. There's a cost to everything we do in law enforcement and government. The savings is, again, the cost, if you let these criminals back out on the street, more crimes are committed, my citizens are victimized, and then there's the cost of the law enforcement effort to go out and get these people again, do the investigations, make the arrest. It really becomes, a continuing motion. So really, that's where the savings is. I can tell you right now, I'm proud to stand on this. We've been in the program 10 years. Right now in Frederick County, we have one of the lowest crime rates in the region, about 1/3 of the national average of serious crime. We placed over 1,400 individuals in removal and deportation processes, including 100 criminal gang members, primarily MS-13.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. And let me just ask if the other 2 sheriffs want to add to that particular point about results you've seen or the utility of the program for you and your jurisdictions. If there's anything additional you want to add about results you've seen or whether it's worth the personnel investment.
Well, there's no question it's worth the personnel investment. And I think Sheriff Jenkins' point is an important one, because when you think about the alternative would be to allow these people to be released that we already have in our custody, letting them go back out into the community after they've already been committed for committing a crime domestically, and then go out and victimize more people. Makes no sense. We have to track them down. It puts the ICE officers or other officers at risk that they have to go out and apprehend them. And it puts the citizens of all the people, it violates our promise and oath to the people that we would do everything we could to keep them safe. And in fact, we didn't. And that's not okay.
Just to add to that, Sheriff, human trafficking, opioid distribution through this country is at an all-time high. As we sit on a corridor into one of the major cities in the U.S., in Houston, Texas, for us to not be part of this program is not something I could think of. I was engaged when 287G was not available back in 2005, along with several other Texas sheriffs that sit on the US 5977 corridor into Houston. And so when the funding actually came available in 2016, I immediately applied, because this is an area in this country we cannot ignore. And working with ICE, working with all law enforcement agencies in this country is the only option for us.
Jesse, let me make 2 brief points. I wanted to mention 2 really heinous crimes that occurred in Frederick County that if it weren't for 287G, these people would potentially be back on the street at some point. We had an individual that was in this country legally in my county that raped and impregnated a 9-year-old girl. He was tried, convicted, and received a very light sentence on the local charge of 18 months. Had we not had the 287 program, this individual would have been released back onto my streets in Frederick County to offend again. The second thing I wanted to talk about was a real heinous murder. Actually, a group of MS-13 members out of Montgomery and Prince George's County brought a young man, again another rival gang member, up to Frederick County, beat him to death, tried to behead him, and buried him in a shallow grave as a retaliation. I've got 6 individuals in my jail that are all in this country legally. 5 are co-conspirators that at some point after the trial, after the sentence, they're going to be deported. The detainer will be there forever. So again, this is a protective mechanism for my county.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. Ms. Asher, let me turn back to you. From the ICE perspective, what do you see as the biggest challenge right now for recruiting additional sheriffs and jurisdictions to the program? We've heard some of the benefits, but from your perspective, what are the challenges you're facing?
So sadly, I think we do a lot more work in dispelling bad or misinformation about immigration law. It's no secret that enforcing immigration laws along the border to the interior, I mean, it's at the tip of the spear of everyday media coverage. We have to spend more time dispelling, demystifying bad information that's out there of what we do and immigration enforcement. So we have to work that much harder, as operators, law enforcement, along with our attorneys, in working with the sheriffs to give good information, also to stakeholders to show the value of a program like 287G, much less partnering with us as we both collectively look to promote public safety. Because, you know, our stance is good immigration enforcement is good law enforcement. So just getting out there, doing the messaging, and dispelling is probably one of our biggest challenges.
Great, great. Sheriff Hodgson, I think you want to add something?
Well, yeah, I'm Sheriff Tom Hodgson. I'm the sheriff of Bristol County, Massachusetts, which is the southeast quadrant of Massachusetts. I have a very large immigrant population in my county, and about almost 10 years ago, I came here to Washington to meet with ICE to ask if they would allow me to be a 287G agency. This was long before immigration was, you know, a really big issue in the country, at least publicly. And I did it because I recognized, having been in law enforcement for almost 30 years, starting out as an officer on the street, and then 20 years as a sheriff, that this program was probably the most effective and efficient program in being able to minimize the resources that would be expended to identify these criminals and hold them in our facilities and not let them go out and commit more crimes against the people that we made a promise to protect. We being the federal government, state, and local partners. That is our charge. And it's no different than, as was said earlier, the FBI, DEA, all have people that work for our agencies who are on their task forces full time. And the reason is because we know the relationships in the communities that the federal authorities don't have, because we deal with these gang members, the associates, the families, and all of that. And so we have the resource of intelligence. I was down in Ground Zero with 50 members of my agency for 5 weeks, working on the rescue effort, talking to officers from all over this country. And if there was one lesson that we learned, the most important lesson we learned, that we could no longer, if we were going to truly maximize our ability to protect the citizens of our country, not only on national security, but domestic security, we had to stop working in these silos. We needed to share our information, our intelligence, our resources more effectively so that we could really give them the maximum impact that they rightfully deserve and expect of us in law enforcement. And so, as has been mentioned earlier, we've seen from the street when we started out to our roles as sheriffs, how this is evolved with illegal immigration to the amount of crimes that are happening. People are dying almost every day in this country at the hands of illegals. I've had 3 people killed in the town of Milford in 2 years, which is the next county over, by illegals. And I don't know how any one of us sits up here or anywhere in this country who took an oath and says, we're going to create a special class of people that will be forgiven of the law, and we will not use every resource we have available to us. And I don't know one citizen in this nation who's ever said, I want law enforcement to have less tools than they otherwise would have to keep me safe. I've never heard one person say that. And I've never heard one law enforcement officer say, I don't want these tools to get the bad guy off the street. I'm going to allow these victims to be exposed to higher risks. It's not what America's about, and it's not what we're about. And we can't do that. And that's why we have the partnerships we have. In our agency, I will tell you, I came back in 16. ICE actually came to me and said, look, you were one of the people that asked way back when, we want to offer you the opportunity. I snatched it. I've got 6 officers already trained. We plan on training 6 more. And we've been doing it for 6 months. I will tell you that in that 6 months, we had identified through this program 21 people. There were more that we had identified, but 21 of the people we had identified already had alien numbers, which means they've already had encounters with ICE. Of those 21, we issued detainers on 86% of them. And there may be more out of coming out of the other 3. But immediately issued detainers on 86 of them. And for us not to have done that and ignored that would be to ignore our obligations and responsibilities as federal, state, and local partners to do everything we can to keep people safe. And I'm proud to be standing with ICE, all the other federal agencies, in my role, as I know these sheriffs are, to do whatever is in our power to meet the expectations of the people in our country that we represent and their families.
Thank
Jesse,
you.
could I say something about,
Yes, please.
piggyback on something Natalie mentioned about the recruiting new sheriff's offices into the program? I can tell you this, that ICE only looks for the quality agencies, and listen, all law enforcement are out there doing the very best they can, but I think what ICE looks for are some of the best performing agencies. It took us a year to get vetted as an agency to get into the program. Once we were into the program, again, getting the proper oversight and vetting by ICE, we selected our personnel. And number one, the people have to want to go into the program for the right reason. Those personnel are completely vetted. They're backgrounded again by ICE. Their personnel records are looked at. Their disciplinary records are looked at. Their performance records are looked at. And if there's any flaw in those records whatsoever, that person is not selected for the program. So I think it's important the public know that, because we are, again, deputized ICE agents.
Thank you. I want to ask one more question, and then we'll try to open it up for questions from the audience. Generally, Sheriff Louderback and Ms. Asher, maybe you can speak to the officer safety issue. If you are effectuating a transfer from a local detention to federal authorities, what is the difference between being able to do that in a secure facility versus having to go effectuate that either in the street or at a home or at a workplace or something like that? Maybe just speak to that perspective from the officer safety and operations standpoint. Maybe start with you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Jesse. If we have a person that's in a county detention center, such as in Texas or any of these other states that have these programs, the ability for ICE to contact that person is virtually 100%, versus a release issue into our community in a very mobile society that we live in today, and therefore not apprehended possibly, and then essentially in the free world, as you would say. So our ability to hold that person there for the required amount of time, which is very quick in our particular case. The Houston area of responsibility and the response time is tremendous. So normally in a couple of hours upon a state charge being finished, then I have ICE at the door to take possession of the inmate, and that is ensures public safety from that standpoint. And it also ensures that my ability to work with ICE and with any federal agency is established, and that's the best possible scenario that we could have in this country as far as working together.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. Ms. Asher.
So thank you, Sheriff. I want to add to that were it not in current times for our partners here at the table and others throughout the country in the 287G program, ICE and specifically my division, ERO, would have that much more of an uphill battle than we are already doing on a daily basis in our role in public safety, in getting the bad guys off the street, simply put. When we had a more fluid opportunity to work in what was more so the criminal alien program setting, where we actually had agents in jails essentially doing a lot of what our DIOs are doing now for us through 287G, we were certainly, as they do, able to cut down the amount of time for processing. Certainly, the safety issue was not that big of a risk. You're right here in a controlled setting to conduct the interview and then eventual transfer to ICE custody. And quite frankly, the pressure of sanctuary policies, not honoring detainers, has forced us as an agency to essentially redirect our operations, redirect our resources to street work. And what that does is it opens a can of worms that we don't like to open. We are in those very communities, which happen to be the immigrant communities, because they are, time and time again, these stories, these sheriffs will tell you, that the victims of these criminal aliens are in the very immigrant communities in which they live, or in which, quite frankly, they prowl upon, they prey upon. So we have that much more of an obstacle in redirecting our resources to conduct these at-large arrests. And quite frankly, that allows the opportunity when we are encountering our target. These are planned operations. We don't do raids. This allows the opportunity, and it is our responsibility, to vet and ensure that perhaps the individuals, the associates that are with our target require due process and an interview by our officers as well. And oftentimes, what we call as collateral arrests will end up in our custody as well. It's just we can't turn a blind eye to that. So with those challenges, again, were it not for these sheriffs and our other partners around the country, at least through this tool of 287G, I think we would have that much more of an uphill battle in our charge, our mission in promoting public safety in our country.
Thank you very much. Let me allow for any other comments you might want to make on this issue, and then I think we'll open it up to media Q&A. And Devin, you'll run the Q&A? Okay, so any other comments, Sheriff?
I would just add one thing, and I think it was touched on a little bit earlier, and that is these arguments that this isn't a cost-effective program, it's a burden on the states and all that. There is nothing that's more of a burden on the state than to have, and you can't put a cost on the lives, certainly, of all the people who have been lost, innocent people. But the cost is, as I think Sheriff Jenkins brought up, for prosecution, again, going out and hunting these people down, the investigative work that goes into it, and on and on and on. It's pretty obvious that this program of partnership is streamlining all of that, saving taxpayers money, keeping them safer. And that's exactly, I think, the actual best foot forward for law enforcement that the people expect us to have when we're doing their work. And whether, money comes out of the left pocket or the right pocket, it's still the taxpayers' money that's going toward that, and it's being done in a more effective way, less costly, because we're not repeating and going back and reinvesting crimes and God forbid, the victimization that we otherwise could have avoided.
Thank you, Sheriff Hodgson. Ms. Asher, anything else?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Sure, I'm good.
Okay. All right.
We can just raise our hands if I can call on you, if you just say your name and what outlet you're from, and then direct your question wherever you want to go. We'll go to Sarah first.
Hi, I'm Sarah Lynn for the Reuters. Thanks for doing this. I had a couple questions for Ms. Asher. One, I was just curious, for 2018, like how many applications you have pending for the 287G program now, if you've seen like a surge in applications, how many you think might get approved by the end of the year. And then separately, I was also wondering about, police departments that have been kicked out of the program, and during the prior administration, there was a number of them that were removed for bad behavior, for racial profiling or discriminatory practices. Some of them have applied to re-enter the program again, so I was actually wondering if you could talk a bit about how many have been kicked out over the years, how many have applied to come back, how you sort of deal with that, what you look at in the criteria when they're trying to re-enter, and just in general how you police against sheriff's offices or police departments that may engage in racial profiling.
Sure. So I don't have numbers today for you as far as what is in the hopper, so to speak, for 2018. I can tell you that obviously there continues to be growing interest because to the very benefits that these sheriffs here have described. So you're talking on those that have been kicked out or bad behavior, and there are measures, as you well know, you've kind of described them for me, that we take, and of course ICE takes very seriously any misconduct on behalf of these officers or the department if it appears that there is racial profiling that is going on. That's not, we don't promote that, and we certainly don't promote that with our partners. I think that it's first and foremost, these sheriffs here will tell you it's the expectation of their officers who go through this rigorous vetting that, you know, I don't think they would forward those individuals' names. They represent these sheriffs here. If there were issues like this, they can have no disciplinaries pending, et cetera. And the 4-week training, which I understand is a lot longer training than perhaps some of what locals offer in their own training programs. These DIOs go through a 4-week training process and the refresher, as we discussed. A large portion of that training is multicultural communication and racial profiling. I mean, we've been accused many times that that's what we do. Quite frankly, I don't see how that can be done. As Sheriff Jenkins described to you, the process by which these individuals who are booked into this local detention facility, every single person goes through the same Q&A as they're being booked in. The 2 magic questions, where were you born and what citizenship, that pretty much snuffs out this opportunity in a contained setting of racial profiling to occur. So we're very, very confident and very comfortable with that process. As for our own vetting processes, we do have a committee that's within ERO, comprised of senior executives within ERO, as well as CRCL, by which these sheriffs who are interested, and they go through the rigorous application process. Much research is done, background investigating by staff officers at headquarters to ensure that these sheriffs, these police departments, these sheriffs are the best fit for this jail enforcement model. Once that research is conducted, the background is put through a packaging process. The board meets. We go through the history of that particular department. CRCL is on board. They're at the table with us. If there are any concerns that otherwise were not considered beforehand, they're certainly raised at that point. I myself have been on several boards where there perhaps were some issues that not clearly answered, where perhaps there was a flaw in their processing, allegation of racial profiling, or something that a misconduct of an officer, that we will stop the process of that particular sheriff going through and being cleared to participate and conduct further investigation before the board will take a vote. So just all that said, along with our partners, we take those allegations, we take racial profiling quite seriously and look to avoid those in this program.
Could I tag on as an example? In 10 years of the program, we have not had one single complaint of profiling. We're considered, and this is ICE's words, not mine, a model program in Frederick County. And I'll tell you, it's all about integrity, and let me tell you why. We had an officer who had been in the program several years, and he was removed because he lied to the agency about putting a dent on the bumper of a pickup truck. That's how serious we take it.
Thanks, Sheriff. Maria, did you have a flag?
Thank you. Sorry. I'm Maria Schetti with the Washington Post. Thank you. I'm curious, this is for Nathalie. Do you envision the 287G program expanding both in number in the jail model, but also beyond the jail model, sort of include officers who work on the street and things like that?
So we absolutely envision expansion in the jail expansion, that model. I mean, I think the stories show here, the evidence shows that it is a great force multiplier. Again, as I need to reiterate, were it not for these sheriffs, along with our other partners throughout the country with 287G, given the uphill battle that has been caused through sanctuary cities and inability to honor detainers, we would really be in a much more world of hurt, and quite frankly, so would the public. There is no discussion at this point of expanding beyond the jail enforcement model. If you're referring to the task force model, that's not in discussion at all.
And why is that?
It's not in discussion at all. It's of no, there's no need for it at this point. It's effective, and quite frankly, to Sheriff Hodgson's point, it's cost effective. It's a contained situation where these individuals are booked in. It demystifies the whole process of our partners vetting foreign-borns for us. So there's no discussion of such.
If I could just piggyback on that quickly. And the other advantage to what has just been said is that many of the sheriffs have regional lockups, which means that the police departments are bringing their arrests to us. And those queries are going on with us, not necessarily with that law enforcement agency. So when they come in, because we're getting all the different lockups from all over the county, we have that first opportunity to be able to ask the question initially to find out if in fact there's an encounter. The other thing I would say is that there's also some things that we're looking at on the sheriff's side that frankly will be an ancillary benefit really to immigration enforcement, and that is our efforts to look at identity fraud, which is a felony under state law. And so we are going to be looking at, we're already doing it in our facility, and hopefully sheriffs across the country will start looking at the idea of identifying imposters. We have thousands and thousands in our jails across this country that are not identified or being released back out because they're operating under different IDs. And in our first 20 that we ran, we came up with 2 imposters. We know that identity theft is a big, big piece of the Dominican cartels. Through particularly Puerto Rico, they were able to access a lot of IDs that way. And so we, again, as sheriffs, have the opportunity with our, no pun intended, captured population, to be able to then look at a whole another piece under state law that ultimately probably will net us out, I'm going to say probably close, maybe 80% or more, would be people who are in the country illegally under state law.
Okay, so I had a quick few questions. My name is Camille DeShalis. I'm with CQ Roll Call. One is, what is the cost of the program, and how do you think this program affects so-called sanctuary cities and the debate of cities that do not cooperate with federal immigration agents?
Is that for me? So costs vary. Again, it depends on, again, ICE absorbs the cost of the training per officer. We purchase and install, as I mentioned in the overview, the equipment that's necessary and the follow-up training. So I don't have the fixed per position, if you will, but I can tell you that the price tag on it is certainly an investment. And again, the return of such, it does act as the force multiplier. It's a great investment, just bar none. I shared with you the numbers, the success of what the program otherwise yield, that quite possibly we would not have been able to touch those individuals had they been released out into the communities. And your second portion to the question, I'm sorry.
One quick thing on the cost.
Please.
Also, it's important to note that these officers are not just doing that. When there's
Right.
not an interview, they're doing their regular job. They're pulled away from the job that they're doing in the facility, maybe in booking wherever, to do that interview and then back to their regular job. So this is not that they're doing it solely full-time. It's when they come into the encounters.
And Sheriff Lauterbach, one thing.
A key part of this, and the message here has to be that we're not hiring additional employees.
Right.
You know, the counties that are involved in this program, we're not hiring additional people to do this. We're actually wearing 2 hats in the jail. It's a very effective hat for us because those folks get the advantage. We're not paying for any of the equipment. We don't pay for the training. We don't pay for the travel. All these things are provided to us at a substantial cost to the federal government. But as far as a local county taxpayer in Texas or these other counties, our only cost, we have to supplant an employee being gone for a month, and that's our cost. And the state of Texas has done some very good things about reimbursing the states for that. So we have a net gain in this country as far as the ability for us to participate in this program, and it's not require any cost to us. It's a very effective way, and I might add that when my two officers came back from their training, that it kind of rejuvenated the jail and brought to light a complete new area that was not known, and actually even today, it's still highly thought of, and the training was very good, very good.
So forgive me if everybody else already knows this, but on the deportations, the removals of 5,996, are those all felony?
I can't speak to that. I'm sure they're not all. They've all clearly met some threshold to be amenable for it to affect the removal.
Is there any way to get a percentage of that?
I don't know. I'd have to look into that for you.
Secondly, for Sheriff Hodgson, has there been any political pushback on this program at all around your region?
Oh, sure. Not effective, because the people are with us. They want to be safe. And I would tell you, I think most Americans, and certainly the people in my county, which is a relatively liberal county, and I'm more conservative, I would tell you that the notion that lawmakers are trying to create laws to give cover and protection to lawbreakers so that they can go out and hurt people even more is outrageous, and the people see it that way. And so when we argue the points back, is we just had a bill filed in Massachusetts yesterday by a state senator who said that he doesn't want any agencies to be able to operate under 287G. That's somebody, a lawmaker, who's completely out of touch with their responsibility and out of touch with the people's will to be safe. And so we also had, I remember coming down here to testify before committee, before Congress, and as I was heading to the Capitol, I got a call from my aide up there and said, "You're not going to believe this, but one of the state representatives yesterday put a notice out to all the people in the area of Brockton that ICE was going to be doing a raid." The people in Massachusetts were outraged that that would happen, that somebody would put these ICE officers at risk to give these people who are criminals hiding in their neighborhoods or operating in their neighborhoods cover to hunker down and put their arsenal together and prepare for ICE to come, because they may very well not want, now that they know what's going to happen, to walk out to that neighborhood because they think they're already here and they're going to get us. These are the kinds of things that the public don't like. I don't care what part of the country you're in. And that's why you're seeing the majority of people pushing back from California, and you're going to see more and more across this country, to stand with ICE, to stand with law enforcement and say, look, enough's enough. It's about us, the people here, and we don't want criminals to be protected. And that's why this program, I think, is going to grow and be more and more successful, and why we have had the successes we have in Bristol County.
About California, I have one question about that. Or could you tell me if there are any of the new applicants are from California?
I don't know at this point where California sits on that. Sorry.
And you brought it up about Brockton, but in Oakland there was a very similar thing where the mayor outed an operation. I think she tried to say that that was because these are the innocents might be wrapped up in the operation. Do you have any type of answer to that?
When you say innocence is wrapped up in it?
Yeah, like innocent people, like people who are only here illegally but haven't committed a crime, might get wrapped up in it.
Well, certainly that's always a possibility, whether you're legal or illegal in this country. If you're around a situation where somebody may be wanted by law enforcement and they find out that you have some other issue, but that wasn't the issue they were looking for. But by and large, what's the alternative? Let the criminals continue living in the neighborhoods? We can't do that. And so, yeah, those people feel badly and probably guilty, and I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling guilty in this country when you don't do something right and it may be getting closer to being exposed. I think that's what keeps us in check and allows us to have the order we have in our society.
And if I can add, I think, again, going back to demystifying how it is that how we enforce immigration law. Sadly, oftentimes it's certainly offensive to me. I know it's offensive to Director Holman when we are depicted, ICE specifically, is that we are not police. We are not law enforcement. Well, we are federal law enforcement. We are partners here. And that said, just as with my partners here at the table, there's this powerful authority that we all take very seriously in our ranks, and that's prosecutorial discretion. So it's one of these situations where, and again, that we've had to redirect our resources to do much of the at-large work, which means we go into the communities, et cetera, looking for the target. It's already planned. And we will encounter individuals who are of similarly situated in that, number one, they're probably here legally. But our resources are strained as well. So the misperception that we sweep up or net up all of these individuals and haul them into the facility, and into the night they're thrown into a plane or a bus and off they go, is just simply not the case. I can tell you, I worked the line for many years as a deportation officer. I can tell you numerous times where, we've got 4 people in front of us during a planned investigation. We've got the bad guy, they're with their associates. And it may be one of these individuals who, they're here illegally, which is breaking a law. But beyond that, we have to measure their public safety. I have limited resources of beds. I've got 2 beds, I've got 4 individuals in front of me. So that prosecutorial discretion that we do every day, just as we do with our partners at state and local level, is, which ones go to the beds, which ones do we put on a reporting criteria, and of those, them all going into immigration proceedings, it's then passed off to the immigration court to take those next steps. So I think we take a lot of energy in explaining more of what we don't do versus the power of good in what we do.
And if I may, in 2011, the former governor of Massachusetts was fighting us in our efforts to get secure communities. And during 2011 at American University, at that time, Secretary Napolitano gave a speech. And in that speech, she said, secure communities are absolutely the best source and resource for targeting criminal illegal aliens in this country. And those, like the former governor, who attempt to try to stonewall this, are actually going to create more of a problem for the very thing that they're trying to prevent, which is people other than criminal illegal aliens. And that was Janet Napolitano.
I think that's it. I hope this was informative for everyone. If you have follow-up questions, I think most of you have my contact information here, and then also my counterpart at ICE, Sarah Rodriguez, who a lot of you probably know, can help track down any specific questions that may not have been answered today. So thanks to the panel, and thanks to everyone.
Thanks for joining us, and let me just thank all of our panelists today and the sheriffs for coming from around the country to be with us. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.